Welcome everyone to the latest Getting Hybrid Work Right call. This is our call series that we've been doing now, I think since June of over the summer, we started this specific series, but it's a part of our broader series of public calls here at the Institute for Corporate Productivity, I4CP. So welcome everyone. We've got a great guest today, a great topic that we're going to be diving into in just a moment. But I want to first start, for those that are new to the call, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity, I4CP. We discover the people practices that drive high performance. We really do more human capital research than any other firm in the world. And we focus on what really drives high performance. And what we mean by high performance at I4CP are organizations with far above average revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction. And we really like to look for those practices that are sort of on the leading edge. We call them next practices, things that companies aren't doing very frequently yet, but that we can tease out of our surveys and all the qualitative interviews that we do to help our member organizations sort of see around the corner as to what's coming next. I mentioned member organizations. We are a member-driven company. You see here just a partial list of some of the great organizations who are members of I4CP and have full access to all of our research and other resources that we provide, as well as all the peer connections that we provide, in addition to obviously the public calls like the one you're all joining here today. For those just dialing in and joining us, I'm glad you could make it, rolling off your previous meetings perhaps. Please introduce yourself over in the chat. We'd love to hear what organization you're with, where you're dialing in from today. Great to have you with us. I want to pause here and introduce my co-host as always, our CEO and co-founder, Kevin Oakes. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Tom. Glad to be here.
Good to have you with us. And our agenda today is on the topic of office redesign for the next era of work. And I'm going to be introducing our guest in just a moment. And Kevin will be helping with the interview and diving into that topic. But just a few other announcements and reminders before we do that. As I said, this is part of a series of calls. Every other week, as you see coming up on March 3rd, will be the next one on Getting Hybrid Work Right. We'll be debuting some findings from one of our most recent studies that we've dubbed Flexibility or Flight. So that'll be a very interesting call. We've got new data we'll be sharing with you on that. But on the alternating weeks, we focus on different sort of centers of excellence, different focus areas within HR. So coming up next Thursday, we're focusing on talent acquisition. After that will be strategic HR on March 10th. Then we'll take a little break because we have our in-person conference for the first time in a few years. This is a great event. I've been with the company 5 years, so I've been able to go to a few of these before COVID hit everyone. And it really is a great event for HR leaders to gather. No consultants, no vendors. You're just there amongst your peers, learning from a great lineup of speakers. You see only some of them here. This isn't the full lineup. This is going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona, where we've hosted it at the Fairmont there for many years. The last couple of years, of course, we didn't host in person. We had some incredible events that were in November each year, 2020 and 2021, that were virtual, and we were very pleased with the outcome of those events. But there'll be nothing like getting back together again, networking, relationship building, and hearing from these great speakers in person coming up in mid-March. Kevin, anything you want to add to that about the conference?
Yeah, just that we also have a virtual option for the conference as well. So like a lot of conferences I expect going forward, this will be very hybrid, and you can either attend in person or virtually. But like Tom said, I'm just thrilled with the speakers and the reception that we've had. We've got hundreds of people coming to Scottsdale, and so it'll be a great event.
Yep. So you see the link there if you haven't registered yet. If you'd like to, i4cp.com/conference. You can get to it from our homepage as well. As Kevin said, we've got the virtual option now in addition to the in-person. A couple of other real quick final reminders. We've got a new study in the field that we've partnered with Fortune magazine on. It's called The Talent Imperative, all about retention, attraction, development of the talent in your organization. We've been studying this, of course, over decades really at I4CP, but really focusing on it, and even more so lately as the war for talent, so-called, has obviously ramped up for everyone. This is in the field and will be open as a survey until February 25th. Again, you can get to it very easily from our homepage. You see the link there. We'll be sure to put that link, thanks Alex, over in the chat, the URL for that. But you can also just get to it from our homepage. Anyone that does the survey gets sort of first access to the aggregate data. So that's what we always like as the sort of quid pro quo for participating. So appreciate it if you'll do that by the February 25th deadline. It'll help us to get even stronger data. All right, so with that, I want to introduce Bri Kastning, who participated in one of our major studies on hybrid work. Bri is the talent strategy implementation lead at McKinstry. Hi, Bri.
Hello, good morning.
Great to have you with us as we talk about office workplaces in this new world of hybrid work. So Kevin, do you want to start things off, or do you want me to lead here?
Well, I think the first thing we should do, and welcome Bri, is just get an overview of who McKinstry is, because I'm guessing there's probably some people on the line that don't know the company very well, Bri, and would love to have you tell us just a little bit more about the company.
Sure, happy to. You can see our marketing blurb here up on the screen, but to break it down, McKinstry is in the business of helping buildings become more efficient. So we are on the internal system side, focused on optimizing commercial building spaces, often workplaces. And so a lot of our experience over the last 60 years has come from the engineering sector, the construction sector, and really merging those into the new world of energy efficiency. So that's a quick overview of what McKinstry does. And we have offices all across the United States. We're primarily based out of Seattle, Washington, which is where we have our corporate headquarters. And we do quite a bit of work across the Pacific Northwest mountain region, and now venturing into the Southeast and East Coast.
And how many employees overall, Bri?
We have about 2,200 employees overall. About half of those are craft workers through our union partnerships in the Pacific Northwest, and about the other half are our professional staff workers.
Got it. Well, I'll tell you what, I love your title. And I'd love you to tell us a little bit more about what it means to be the lead for talent strategy implementation. Too often we focus on the strategy part, but you're doing the hard work around it, and love to hear a little bit more about your day-to-day role.
Happy to decipher this a little bit. So as you touched on, the piece around strategy in the talent sector is becoming much more of a focus for companies, McKinstry included. And so my role was really created over the last few years out of the opportunity really that we saw, as well as the need that we saw in terms of our HR team taking on more and more of these strategic initiatives, these ad hoc projects, these reactionary and responsive projects related to our people. Things like needing to develop a hybrid workforce, things like needing to develop policies, processes, procedures related to everything from vaccines, exemptions, et cetera, you name it, related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So that was, in a nutshell, sort of how my role came to be. It's a mix of project management, operations, really working with our HR leadership team and our HR team at all, and the business to understand what do we need to focus on now, and really creating a dedicated resource towards helping it get going and leading through those initiatives.
And you've been immersed since the pandemic really hit the United States around flexible and hybrid work inside the organization, even as part of a program that you have called PeopleFirst Work, which I'd love to hear a little bit more about that program. How was it developed? What is it? So tell us a little bit more about it.
Of course. So like many companies, McKinstry was watching the evolution towards a hybrid work model for many years, even leading up to the pandemic. We operate in sort of 5-year planning cycles. And so in 2019, we were in the process of sort of developing our 2025 plan, which was kicked off in 2020. Now, in that design and development, none of us predicted the pandemic. And so having to adjust and course correct became clearly an evident thing that we needed to do as we thought about our people focuses. And one of those people focuses in our greater 2025 plan was developing a model that allowed our workforce to really evolve into this new hybrid way. Interesting to know about the workforce at McKinstry, we have professional engineers who do operate within the scope of a computer or a software for the majority of their job. We also have project management professionals or craft trades workers who are on site 5 days a week because that's the nature of their job. So we have a variety of type of workers, where people work, what's considered their workplace. So as we were getting ready to develop our PeopleFirst Work program, which People First is one of our core values at McKinstry, so that had to be primary front and center as we built this model.
Yep.
But for us, it was ensuring that, when we looked at what other companies were doing, as we took pulse, a one-size-fits-all model really wasn't going to be something that was compatible for McKinstry's business. So instead, what we did is we tried to design a model that allowed for flexibility to be interpreted at the individual and at the business level. So we created sort of guardrails. We created a program more so that allowed employees and managers to work together to understand what works best for them, their role, their team, their business, knowing that whatever way you slice it at McKinstry, it could come out different. So that, in a nutshell, was what PeopleFirst Work was really about. It was also in response to, as we checked in with our people throughout the pandemic, we heard from them that over 80% desired continued flexibility post-pandemic. So we knew this was something that was coming. We knew we couldn't turn a blind eye to it. And so we really wanted to jump on this and essentially create something that was going to enhance our business, entice our people to want to stay and really work with them to evolve McKinstry into the next level.
So, Bri, it sounds like you really pushed that decision-making down to the manager level, giving them the autonomy to do what's right for their employees and for the organization. Was there ever an organizational policy that was put out over the last couple of years around remote or flexible or hybrid work? I'm not sure what words you use, and in office?
We have some core tenets. So we do have a philosophy that has been built, distributed. We've steered away more from policies other than things related to technology and just our day-to-day employee handbook. But for us, we use the term primarily remote because we believe that even if employees spend the majority of their time working from home, because that's the arrangement that works for them that they've determined between their manager and their team. We have so many people that work as part of our national business that they may be doing a project in Chicago, but they may work in Tennessee. And we know that that is part of our business in some cases, and we want to allow for that. But we also know that for us, connection, collaboration, that in-person touch is part of our culture. And so the intentional use of primarily instead of full-time, 100% remote was specific because we wanted to ensure that our people understood that at a certain point, there may be a need to come to an office, to a setting, to a gathering, to a team huddle, and to meet your team members in person. Now, that may not be every day of the week, but we wanted to set those types of guardrails, but still allow for that flexibility to really be at the hands of the managers and the employees. We spent a lot of time training our HR BP team, our talent development team. Huge shout out and kudos to them. They spent so much time working on developing a series of trainings throughout the summer of 2021 that were really focused on not just ensuring there was an understanding around the why McKinstry was moving forward with this model, why we were developing it in this way, giving our people and our employees and our managers this level of freedom, so to speak. But there was also the ensuring that there was a comfort there. Comfort with managers being able to have those conversations, comfort with the employee being able to advocate for themselves. We did, in that training, focus on things like reason neutral, right? Leading with empathy, ensuring that we're getting creative in how we think about flexibility. So we really tried to kind of boil that down for our managers because manager capability is something that, McKinstry, like many companies, is working on. We've grown so fast in the last several years and added a lot of new managers to our mix. And so ensuring that they have the right capabilities to be able to lead through this effectively was absolutely key. We couldn't just turn this over to our managers without giving them the support and guidance to do it successfully.
Well,
Well,
and that's so critical, and and it's interesting and maybe even a little progressive given the industry that you're in, your approach to all of this. Tom mentioned our flexibility or flight study that's coming out soon, and we found in our research and came up pretty strongly in that study that companies really do need to push that autonomy down and let managers manage, which we've said several times in different studies. There's an excellent article, by the way, in HBR that just came out, written by longtime friend Diane Gerson. She was the CHRO at IBM. And then Linda Grattan, who's a professor at London School of Business and a prolific author, and a lot of you probably know her from her Harvard days, just around this notion of what we need to do to support managers going forward. Managers, by and large, are pretty overwhelmed right now, across different companies. They're struggling with this new reality of how to manage, flexible teams that consist of people in the office, out of the office, with varying viewpoints on, what's right and what's wrong. And the shift right now in this new reality of work, I think, is putting more and more stress on the role of being a people manager inside of the organization. So to tell me a little bit more about the development you're doing for managers internally, I just think that's so critical.
Yeah, and I'll say the focus on manager capabilities is one of those initiatives that's part of our 2025 plan. And this PeopleFirst Work aspect is just one component of it, right? Yep. But within the PeopleFirst Work model, the training that we focused on over the summer, we went as far as to have actual role plays so that our managers could experience different scenarios. That disgruntled employee, right? The employee that maybe wants something different than what the manager sees. Situations where maybe the manager needs to be a little bit more flexible or creative in thinking differently about their employee's arrangement, because maybe they're thinking of a different way. So we focused a lot on just the overall sort of skill sets and soft skills around empathy, around creativity, around sort of leading through a conversation without jumping straight to a solution. We're a bunch of engineers at McKinstry, so you can imagine that's easier said than done. But that is what we are focused on, and leadership development, just like many organizations, is so critical to McKinstry being able to really rise to that next level that we're trying to. And so in order for this to be successful, right, that starts at the manager level. But you pull that up, and even greater, it starts at the leadership level. So for us, as we were developing this, we had to ensure that our C-suite, our governance committee, was really bought into this model, that they believed that it could work, so that they could then ensure that they're passing that down to their vice presidents, to their leaders, right? And then to each leader within its business unit, and then each business unit manager to their series of managers. So it was really also about starting at the top and getting leadership bought in at that core level to really disseminate that down to the day-to-day manager. We will be continuing campaigns, trainings as we start to ramp back up. Like many folks, the pandemic took a little bit of an unexpected turn in the fall. And so our initial kind of rollout date, soft launch date in October has been postponed. Right now, we're focused on giving our people at least 60 days notice. So we anticipate probably early summer is when we'll start to really push for that soft launch, understanding there's going to be an acclimation period, right? We're not going to get it right the first time. Managers aren't going to magically have the right answer to arrangements that may need to be tweaked over time. So we want to allow our people that space to kind of adjust, acclimate, get settled, get used to what might feel like a working solution, an arrangement that works best for them, that works best for the organization, and works within the structure of their team, knowing that each team looks a little bit different.
I was curious, what kind of feedback have you gotten from the managers who have gone through the program, and also what kind of outcomes are you already seeing, or are you expecting to see once you have the full rollout? Like, how will you know that this has been a success?
Yeah, I think part of that starts with having a structured and sort of a robust strategy to listen and engage with your people. And so we've really been focused throughout the pandemic on having those touch points, having that engagement, that pulse survey, after we've done a training, after we've rolled out information, just ensuring that we gather data points so that we can be informed about, was this successful? Did this work? Did this land and resonate in the way that it was designed to? Where do we need more training? What are areas that we need short snippets and micro learnings? So that's been one thing that, especially on our talent development and our training team, we've been focusing on leveraging that feedback, those comments, that data to really understand as we start to ramp up and develop more trainings. And as managers start to actually get into that hybrid work arrangement with their teams, that's another time that we'll pulse, right? Because a lot of times managers won't know what they don't know. And so same with employees, and it's going to be really getting into those arrangements, which is why we plan to continue that engagement strategy, that listening strategy, that surveys, those touch points throughout the pandemic and really beyond. I think it's great to have that annual engagement survey. McKinstry does that on an annual, biannual basis, but also having those kind of more often touch points and ability to really, engage with your people on that day-to-day level is important. And so that's what we've been trying to sort of build that structure around to ensure that we have a cadence that makes sense for our business, so that we can tweak and we can adjust and we can really respond in the way that's necessary to ensure we're moving forward in a successful way.
Pamela in the chat had just asked to give us a sense. You've got about 2,200 employees as you described, various types. What's the size of your HR team and what's the size of the company's overall management team?
Yeah, we have about, I would say, 200 to 300 people leaders at the company. And so we have within that around, for our HR team, about 35 on the HR side in various functional areas, from HR business partners to talent development, recruiting, HR operations. So for us, we really try and ensure that we have a business model. So we do divide it by line of business, given we have different sectors within our organization. So we have teams within each group that support those different sectors.
Well, thanks for describing it. I'm sure we'll touch on it again, the People First program. One of the things I liked about reading about it first, when I was first introduced to it, was in what you're seeing here on the screen. For those that on the call that aren't I4CP members, this is one of our research briefs where Bri was one of two people that was featured in that, and we talked about a couple of different topics, one being the People First Work program. One of the things I liked, and I think I read it there first, was that the focus on flexible work and hybrid and so on in the name People First isn't just on that topic, right? That's a broader umbrella that also includes People First benefits and People First other aspects of your philosophy. And you mentioned earlier that People First is one of your core values at the organization. So I like that, because it's not setting up hybrid and flexible work as like this separate, maybe temporary thing that we're going to focus on for 6 months, give it a name, and then hopefully get away from it down the road. By building it into and having it have the same name as an overall value of the company, it's like you're saying this is real, this is here to stay. At least that's the sense I got. Absolutely.
And for us, it's a commitment to our people. Our model that we have now may change over the next 5-10 years. And so just that ongoing sort of commitment to say, hey, we are committed to putting the well-being of our people at the top, right? And ensuring that the work environments that we create have our people in mind is absolutely what it's all about. We also know that we won't have everyone in a hybrid model. As I described in the nature of our work, that just isn't part of our business. And so we have People First there as a way to also ensure that we're focused on flexibility in the sake of time, flexibility in a bunch of different ways other than just where you work. So that was another intentional aspect there.
And speaking of where you work, you have a fair amount of employees that are visiting customer sites, right, and client sites. Are they under different rules than people who do not visit customers?
In terms of rules and like for the People First Work program?
Yeah, or in general, I'm just wondering if, how life is different, I guess, for the people who are out on the road and visiting those clients versus the other employees who are not.
Yeah, whether it be sales folks, or we have, engineer and technical experts that go out to schools to look at their mechanical systems, to look at their boilers, and to do site assessments. So we have a good percentage of our population who their car may be their work site, right? Or where they're taking calls. And so that was another reason why, as we thought about this, it really had to boil back down to what is the employee's nature of their job? What is the team? What is the focus there? Because that's going to really be what dictates what the capabilities are in terms of where that employee can work. If that employee is part of our call center, can they do that from home? Do they need a physical presence in the office? It's about getting our managers and getting our employees to ask those questions. Now, at the same time, a core part of our McKinstry culture is relationships. And so we believe, again, a reason why I touched on this earlier, we haven't use language like 100% or fully remote, is because we want our employees to see that as a priority, to see that as part of their job, and it's something that we want them to focus on when it comes to their career at McKinstry and their day-to-day work. So while their job,
you gave us some great info for the study that Tom was just talking about that's up on the screen. I guess I'd be curious, Bri, as we think about designing the new workplace, what are you seeing or what are you hearing from?
We lose Kevin? I think what he was going to be asking is, like, what are you hearing in terms of, he'll dial back in. What are you hearing in terms of trends from maybe your clients in terms of design and redesign of workspaces for this world of hybrid work?
Absolutely. And I see Kevin's back on. So
yeah,
I'm back. Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
No worries.
So to answer your question, Tom, I think, as we're in the business of commercial buildings. And so a lot of that, especially in the Pacific Northwest, as you can imagine, in the Seattle area, we spend a lot of time with customers in the tech space building their campuses. And so I think part of one of our own trends that we're looking at, as well as a trend that we're hearing and seeing with our customers, is the idea of doing different with your office space. Depending on the client or the company's intentions to grow and what those growth plans look like, will they need more office space? Probably, maybe. But I think part of this evolution into sort of a flexible work model or a hybrid work model that a lot of companies are adopting is changing up how an office is used, right? And thinking of the office space differently than everyone coming into the office to sit down and do their individual work, right? Instead, an office becomes a place to collaborate, to connect, to celebrate together, right? It's bringing people together to work as one versus bringing individuals to a space to work. Now, will there always be a need for individuals to have a space within an office if that's how they choose and want to work? Absolutely, right? Not everyone's gonna prefer to work in their bedroom or their living room, or if they don't have that dedicated office space within their home. So we still want, especially at McKinstry, our offices to be conducive to those individuals that want that dedicated individual work time. But we also want to think about how we can use some of that space that we're now kind of gaining from those individuals that are going to have more of a shared model, more of a hoteling model. Their primary location may be their home. How we can use that gained space to change it up, to create more opportunities for people to collaborate, to create more space for people to celebrate, connect together, more huddle areas for teams of larger sizes to get together. So that's what we're trying to think about within our own campuses across the country. And it's a trend, I'd say, that we're also seeing, and I'm also seeing as I research into some of the other companies and what they're doing. In particular, I know Expedia and Microsoft have recently announced their plans to return in a hybrid model in the Seattle area. We've been part of those campus designs. So I know firsthand that part of those campus designs have been to create more spaces for employees to really come and collaborate and connect and build relationships versus just do individual work.
And I love that you focused on the two main angles there, because you're right. There are the people that, they bought a home years ago and or renting, and they don't have the space to work from home, and it's been very uncomfortable for them, or they have kids or whatever the distractions might be. So they actually prefer, surveys always show there's a range of folks here who, even if they can work from home in terms of their role, maybe prefer not to for lots of reasons. And so you hit on that. But then you also hit on, I loved your phrasing of coming to work together as one. We use words like collaboration and teamwork and things like that can be done in enhanced ways in person, but coming together to work as one. I love that phrasing. And you touched on square footage and how much space will organizations need. And you mentioned some companies that are still very much investing in more space. Alex, we had a poll on this specific question, and this is where I'd really like to bring some of the folks on the call, not only to do this poll, if you could bring it up, thank you, but to get some input from folks on the call. So we're wondering, by the end of this year, by the end of 2022, what will be your organization's, to the best of your knowledge to predict, what will be your organization's office space footprint compared with pre-pandemic 2019? So looking back to what it was, and then looking ahead to the end of this year, and we've given you a few choices here. If you're growing just because of growth, you can tell us that. If you're growing and need more space because of safety and social distancing reasons, you can choose that option. If it's going to be about the same, if it's going to be less because your organization is getting smaller, financially, it may be a struggle during the pandemic or for whatever reasons, or if it's less because of the shift to more people working remotely.
I'm fascinated by this particular question, Tom and Bri, because I think it's all over the map right now from what I'm, as I'm talking to different companies. Bri, you mentioned, Microsoft and Expedia as campuses local to you, beautiful, beautiful campuses, but, they're essentially doubling down on campus space, right? And on office space, as is Google, as is Amazon, a number of companies we read about. There are others that are going to a very remote first kind of approach, right? And reducing their office space. And so I just find this, the answers to this question to be kind of all over the map. And I'm wondering what you're finding as part of your business.
Yeah, I think that, it definitely depends on the nature of the client's work. Quite a bit of our work outside of the kind of more commercial new construction space that we think of in Seattle is also in energy retrofits for school districts, for universities, for healthcare institutions. So even in sort of industries like those where traditionally we're not seeing a huge boom, they're also thinking about how they can accommodate more people in their space. And so that's another reason why, even just from a design perspective, thinking about what you want your office to be used for. That's been a conversation we have had at McKinstry many, many times at a leadership level, at a manager level, and at the employee level, right? Where we've continued to ask our people, how will you use the office, right? That's going to help us better understand, if we have 40% of our users, or not users, 40% of our employees wanting to use the office on a occurring regular basis, then we need to ensure we have space for at least 40%, if not more, as we think about our own growth. But we also want to be able to use our offices, and this is something that McKinstry is kind of doing a little bit different. We also want to be able to use our offices and our workspaces as a way to engage with our communities, right? Bring innovation, not just at the McKinstry level, but in our world around energy efficiency, climate change is going to be tackled by not just one company, but by a multitude of companies. And so that's something that we're also trying to leverage by doing different within our own office structure, is allow for space to bring outside partners in and really create kind of that engagement area within our communities for those different areas. So.
You see here the poll results. The most common answer at 45% was about the same in terms of square footage going forward. Although several people are over in the chat commenting that it's about the same, but it's going to be reconfigured. So I think that's going to be a pretty common approach, moving away from cubicles and offices to some degree and having more open collaboration spaces, maybe more cubicles or offices, but more distance between them. And then the second number response here was less, primarily because of the shift to more remote and hybrid. And then just a handful of folks that are, at least on this call, saying they're going to have more either due to growth or due to the need for just greater space between people for safety reasons. Interesting results there. We've definitely seen, as Kevin mentioned earlier, some companies that have made big headlines. I think Google was another one, expanding their office footprint in various locations. And continuing to grow it out. Of course, some of those companies are growing even with their size pretty rapidly as businesses.
Yeah, that's right. You know, there was if we shift gears a little bit here, I appreciate the question that one of our analysts, Carol Morrison, posted in the chat. And Bri, she said she loved that in the brief you spoke about the components of your culture, such as collaboration, to guide the reasons why people come into the office. Do you see that as a framework to help strengthen your culture within the context of a distributed work model?
Absolutely. I think the model that we're referring to for McKinstry is the 5 C's, which for us, as we were building out our PeopleFirst Work program, we really wanted to anchor to those core tenets of what made our culture, in our opinion, so successful, right? And at McKinstry, like many companies, when we ask people, why did you come here? Culture is our number one answer, time and time again. And so knowing that culture was the thing that we wanted to ensure remained strong throughout this evolution, throughout this change in work environment, that was what we sort of built this campaign and this model around, was to really bring culture to the center. And so when we think about collaboration, creation, connection, celebration, and communication, for McKinstry, those were kind of core things that we felt, were part of what made our culture what it was. And so we wanted to kind of bring a light to that. All of those things are things we can do remotely. All of those things are things we can do while working together. All of those things are things we can do in a hybrid way. But the key here is intentionality and figuring out what is the best way to collaborate for what. When is the best way to connect in different ways, depending on the situation. And so if I'm working on a project with someone, can I collaborate effectively over a Teams call? Can we share a virtual whiteboard together? Does it need to be something where I'm physically in the same space as the other individual? It's just bringing that forward so that our people are starting to think about asking themselves that question. Our managers are thinking about asking themselves those questions as they schedule team meetings, as they schedule, in-person things. This is really kind of bringing back to the forefront, that intentionality around how we do work, where we do work, when we do work, and why we do work. And so these are all things that as we start to really evolve into that people first work model, and we see people start to take advantage of more time in the office, that split hybrid model a little bit more, these are going to be things that we really focus on bringing forward in our office spaces. So making sure we have campaigns, events, and then also just within each team, and efforts dedicated to these different tenets.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you're doing that. You mentioned intentionality around this. I've been fascinated by how some companies are using organizational network analysis to illuminate this. We've been big fans, obviously, of O&A for a long time, and Rob Cross is part of our team. He's kind of the father of that science. But he wrote a great article recently. I think it's on our website, and I forget where it was originally published, around using O&A to figure out who's best for in-person collaboration versus remote. What roles might be best suited for that, or different times in a project, et cetera. And I'm just curious, Bri, how you've tried to analyze that internally.
Yeah, I think we have not done a formal analysis. Like you mentioned, I think our analysis has been done a little bit more informally over the last 2 years, just based on, we've had some teams that have continued to come in or even just adopt a hybrid schedule, because as Tom mentioned, some people work better from the office, or the nature of their job requires that they have some office time or some time in person. And so I think by experiencing that over the last 2 years, we've really taken a look at, within our teams, who's good at who can do what successfully from home, who can do what successfully through a Teams call. But I think we've also seen the gaps, and it's become clear within our own businesses where we really do better when we are face to face. And so some of these things in particular, I'd say around, for example, creation and the innovation, we can be innovative on a screen call, but can you really be that organic in an online meeting, right? It was scheduled, it was intentional, right? You don't have that brush in the office where all of a sudden an idea sparks and you have a conversation that spirals and leads to something. You can still sometimes have that, but that is something that we're looking to focus on and shine a light on when it comes to reminding our employees and our teams and our people why it's so important to still have that time in office. Can you do your work from home and be productive? Absolutely, that's not the question. And that's why we really tried to build this model, is to remind our employees who are definitely maybe a little bit more hesitant even about coming into an office to some degree, that there's benefit there, that there's gain, that the relationships at McKinstry are only successful because of these things and because of that time that we do spend face to face. So that's some of what we're trying to do. I would say it's definitely more informal on the analysis. It's anecdotal. It's working within each of those teams as issues arise and as challenges arise. But it's a great thing to think about as we start to really roll this out in the summer and go through that kind of soft launch and acclimation period. We plan to use a series of surveys and check-ins and data analysis that way, but I love the idea of more organizational analysis as well.
I'd be interested in hearing from a few other folks on the call on this. We're looking at your 5 C's approach here, being intentional around culture and how you're going to shift, leverage that in decisions around the actual office workspace. Kelly and Bethany and Pamela all said that in terms of the poll we did, that it would be about the same in terms of square footage, but that they're all going to be using the space differently. So I'd love to hear from a few other voices on the call. If you want to come off mute and maybe share how you're going to be using it differently, or to the conversation that Bri and Kevin just had, what's informing that? Is there a formal analysis like an O&A that's informing those decisions and those changes, or is it more informal? Would just love to hear from a few other folks. Kelly, in particular, you had said that no change in terms of square footage because your lease won't be up for a while, but you're going to be using it differently. So just anyone want to come off mute? I see Bethany.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. We're in Reston, Virginia, and we actually own our building. So we have we're invested in our real estate. And we have known for a while that our meeting space wasn't meeting our needs. We only have 4 or 5 exceptionally large spaces. They are convertible, so we can, make them bigger, smaller. But we needed more larger spaces. So even pre-pandemic, we were already talking about taking out a whole floor and kind of what could we re-envision and make that look like, and to meet these kinds of needs. And then we aren't doing formal O&As, but we've been doing pulse surveys throughout, just kind of temperature checking with our employees and where they're at. And hoteling doesn't really seem like a thing that they're super interested in. We have a handful that are cool with it if it means they get to continue to, have that flexibility. But for the most part, our employees have stated they still want to keep their individual desk spaces. And so we're kind of thinking about, okay, how do we, maximize the space that we now have, because we are going to have a lot of folks who aren't coming in. And then use that to make more collaboration space in particular. We already have the cafe and the gym and kind of all the fancy stuff already. So it's more about how do we create more of these collaboration spaces for our teams.
Do you have a timeline on that? Do you think that when those decisions will get made and when those spaces will be sort of built out?
Always great questions. We have committed to our teams. We are not coming back to the office sooner than July. That's been our statement. Like, we didn't have to make any changes because of Omicron or anything like that. And so probably forthcoming soon. They've already been experimenting with some of the space in the building to just kind of say, what can we do with it? And just kind of trying to solve for options. And then, I don't know, I'd say maybe April, May, there'll be some more definitive decisions as to what that will look like.
We had a question in the chat from Gina that maybe Bri, you might have some thoughts on this from either what you're doing it for your own employees at McKinstry or for some of your clients around celebrations and being inclusive of folks, across all the different work locations. Any thoughts there as to what you've seen or tips?
Yeah, and I'll speak to the fact that, I recognize international companies and companies that have workers that work in that international locations. There is that additional layer of challenge around time zones. We face that on a domestic level, so it's a matter of, 3 hours difference. So it's a much different landscape that we're playing in, but we have set core business hours. And so that's something that, depending on the team, depending on the region, right? We have some teams that are all in the Pacific Northwest, so they're all on the same time zone. We have other teams that work nationally, and we have people across different time zones. And so they have set core business hours where they expect if there is an all-team gathering, an all-team meeting, et cetera, it falls within that time frame. And that's our way of ensuring that, for that happy hour that's scheduled on Seattle time, our poor people in Tennessee aren't having to stay into their dinner hour, right, to participate. And so that's something that we're trying to be conscious of. That was part of our training, part of that recognition. And so as managers are also, as they wrapped up those conversations, part of that was taking stock and actually taking, a track of who on your team was doing what and what arrangement after you had kind of come to those conclusions and made those determinations on arrangements. So part of that was to give our managers them time to say, okay, if I have people working in these arrangements on these schedules, what are the times that really everyone can be together? So that's something that we've tried to do. And this extra runway has been helpful in giving our managers and those team leaders time to plan for what that looks like. But I think the other piece is it doesn't have to be face to face. It doesn't have to be everyone on the call at the same time. Thinking outside the box and thinking creatively about how you can celebrate asynchronously, how you can celebrate in a way that, is everyone jumping on a doodle board? We've had that for people's birthdays where everyone can go on a page and write a message and, add a fun little note or whatnot, all separately. And then that's delivered to that person at a certain time. So there's just different ways to, I think, engage that it'll take time and people actually thinking creatively and thinking outside the box, but there are different ways to do it. It's just about embracing the difference.
Yeah, that's a great way to, in office locations, things like birthdays or celebrations, some things it would be difficult to replicate without a lot of cost, like literally getting together and having cake. But having a card that gets passed around the team or the department and everyone signs the birthday card or the retirement card, that can be replicated in the way you just said. So yeah, there's a lot you can do to creatively replicate at least some of what we enjoyed about in person in the past.
Well, and I think the key there is don't stop celebrating. GE back in the day used to celebrate everything. That was their moniker, right? And I think that's the key for a lot of organizations is, I sometimes get tired of celebrating everything internally, but I realize how important it is. It's especially when you've got so many remote employees, create those moments and be creative in how you address those moments by continuing to celebrate. And it sounds like that's what you're doing, Bri.
Yeah, and I think one of the beautiful silver linings that I'll mention out of the pandemic is, we have had a very regional focused model at McKinstry that has been how we've grown and developed and, added new locations in different regions. And so in a unexpected way, we sort of created unintentional silos. And so part of the pandemic, everyone being, kind of in different locations and not really mattering where you were physically, it helped some of our teams and some of our sort of enterprise teams really think about how they can connect. And so that's something that at a corporate level, we're really going to be trying to infuse more of as we start to really soft launch and roll back into the summer, hopefully, in our PeopleFirst Work arrangements, is thinking more at the enterprise level, how we can do corporate-wide engagement, how we can have, things that in sort of like a Shark Tank innovation challenge where we're having our employees of all different locations be able to participate, whether they're in an office, whether they're at home, whether they're in Texas, whether they're in Seattle, right? So it's just creating those opportunities for everyone to get involved in the company culture.
Well, and it is all part of the culture. And, to kind of circle back to that concept, we're obviously very enamored with culture change and how you renovate culture overall. And I'd just be curious, Bri, how are you thinking about culture in the future? And are there efforts right now to make sure that you're continuing to, evolve or renovate your culture for the future?
Absolutely. I think we are focused on, we like to use the word enhance, because we believe that it's not about, necessarily keeping the culture as it is today, but just making it better as our people change, as our workforce changes, as the way that we work change. And so that's something that we're open to, we're embracing, and we want our people's thoughts on how we can continue to be better, right? The McKinstry that started as 100 people is different than the McKinstry that's now 2,200. And so we want to ensure that our culture is growing in that way that needs to grow to really embrace who we are in this next generation. And so I think part of this 5 C's model is to really help us stay true to what we know is important, but to be able to unlock different ways of really embracing those tenets. So while we may have had, quarterly meetings that had our CEOs sitting in our gym in Seattle, where all of our employees would gather on the bleachers and we'd have a big meet, like that may not be how we have those moments anymore. And that's okay. It may be different than what we've done, but we can still have those connection points as part of our culture and just do it in a different way. And so that's something that we're taking a look at, and we've been taking a look at our corporate level and just beyond in terms of what we're doing, really in everything that we do. We have a new employee experience that used to be flying all of our new employees to our corporate headquarters for 2 days to have this series of conversations, events. We've been doing that virtually, and it's still worked out really well. Will we eventually kind of have a hybrid model of that? Probably. So it's all about doing different and being okay, not going back to the way that you did things in 2019. And I think that's something that we're really trying to hold ourselves accountable to, is thinking about how we can merge and really move in a direction that gets us better than where we were in 2019.
Yeah, it certainly has been a time of great experimentation for all of us. I'm just curious, Bri, is there anything that you've done that didn't work? Any mistakes that have been made along the way that you've learned from?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I think, when we first started this PeopleFirst Work development and design, we were really leading from the lens of, we want to build a hybrid model that has everyone come back to the office at least 2 days a week. And that was kind of what we were building around. And it really took a lot of check-ins with our people, a lot of data points, and a lot of reflection at the leadership level to understand that if that's a change that we're committed to, we may lose our people, we may lose our talent. And so, I'm thankful that McKinstry pressed the brakes and really took stock and looked at, what do we need to do that's best for our people moving forward, that in turn is also best for our organization. And so that embracing of PeopleFirst Work wasn't a first step, wasn't an initial, but it's definitely where we ended up. But I think all in all, right, just the level of resilience of people that has been demonstrated over the last 2 years is something that employers and companies really can't forget. And hopefully that's something that they're holding on to as they think about what's next in this way of work, as they design and develop new ways of using their office spaces. Just remembering that people are resilient, but also need to be supported and need to be looked after. And if you are able to do that, you're going to be poised to be in a good spot when we come to this next phase.
Well, major kudos to you and the organization for making that pivot. What you just described, initially thinking of requiring, say, the same, 2 days in the office or 3 days in the office, sort of a strict rule on hybrid, but then moving to a more flexible, as you've dubbed it, people first approach. That is one of the findings of the study that we'll be focusing on our call and revealing some of the latest data on in 2 weeks from now. That's exactly what our study has found, is that moving to that more flexible approach actually correlates to higher performance for organizations. So if that correlation rings true for McKinstry, then you'll be in good shape going forward.
And just to play off that, Tom, not only is it, I think, important from an employer brand perspective and to attract good talent, it's also important from a diversity perspective. I think more and more organizations are recognizing that, as they try to fill out their diversity agendas, and I'd say most organizations are trying to improve the diversity of their workforces, they need to be more accommodating, right, to the pipeline that they've got. I've witnessed a few companies lately still kind of holding on to, old ways of working and losing great talent as a result of that. And I think, Bri, you said it very nicely, just about how you have to pay attention to employees going forward, the empathy that you've got to show employees, but at the same token, not pretending that things are going to go back to the way they were before the pandemic. We're in a new era and things are going to be very different going forward. So with that, and thank you, Tanya, for your point around diversity and inclusion. Tom, any last questions for Bri as we kind of wrap up here?
No, it's been a great conversation, Bri. I want to thank you for your participation in our study with my colleague Carol that we showed on the screen earlier, and for your time here today. It's been a great conversation. As I just alluded to, I think that the direction that you're going with the people first approach, I really love the fact that your hybrid model is under the umbrella of a broader people first approach that's attached to the core value of the organization and isn't just about hybrid work. Because I think a lot of companies, if they make it into something that's a temporary thing that we're just doing right now, it could easily be undone later. And that's not to say that you won't flex and grow with your approach here as you roll it out and as you learn more. But I just think it's great that it's so well integrated with everything else you're doing from that people first mantra.
I appreciate that. And it's a huge kudos to our greater HR organization at McKinstry. I'll give a shout out to all of my colleagues who have helped lead through this transformation impressively and with a lot on their plate. So for all of the other HR folks on the call, I'm sure you can relate. It's been a crazy 2 years. Hang in there. But I'm happy to connect offline for anyone that has questions. I'll pop my email in the chat as well.
Oh, that's great. And between email and LinkedIn, I know a lot of folks that come to these calls connect with me personally, and no doubt Kevin as well, and connect with our guests. And we definitely encourage that. Just a couple of last reminders as we wrap up here. I mentioned earlier at the outset of the call, we've got a survey in the field called the Talent Imperative, all about concerns around attracting, development, and retaining the right people in your organization. That survey is open now. You can see the link there on the screen. We put it in the chat earlier. You can also just go to our homepage and you'll find it in the top right corner. Please do that survey to represent your organization by February 25th, and you'll be one of the first to get access to the aggregate results. I want to remind everyone of our call in 2 weeks. That'll be the next one, focusing on getting hybrid work right, like we did today. That's March 3rd, Thursday, once again, same time, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. Will be revealing, as I was just alluding to, some of the initial key findings from our flexibility or flight study that we've been doing over the past couple of months. And one last reminder, our in-person or virtual conference, we'll have both options for this: in person in Scottsdale, Arizona, or join us virtually March 14th through the 17th. You see here just a sampling of the great speakers that we've got lined up at this conference. It'll be great to be back in person, but if you can't do that for whatever reasons, you can still join us virtually. And you see the link for that, i4cp.com/conference. Would love to have folks on this call get registered if you're able to. So with that, I want to thank again Bri, our special guest, and Kevin. Always good to be with you, sir.
Yeah, I want to thank Bri as well. You're fantastic, and obviously you're getting a lot of kudos in the chat, but thanks, Bri, for sharing so much. You've been a great partner.
Thanks for having me, and I appreciate the conversation with both of you.
Thanks. Very good, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you in the next couple of weeks on these calls that continue. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care.